Hello everyone, thanks for joining us today. We are now live with MPW hello, am I audible?
I can hear you absolutely fine.
Okay.
So yes,
hello.
Can hear you.
Yeah, okay. Hello everyone, we are live now. So we are now live with MPW. Over to you, James.
Thank you very much indeed, and indeed, good morning to everyone who is joining us this morning. Today is about medicine, as you will know, which is why you're here. But today is about medicine and how actually you enter medical schools within the UK from an A-level position, from a foundation position. But generally speaking, trying to give you a bit more of the overview to what is quite a complex process. But it's only ever as complicated as you make it. It's just a long process. Now, I absolutely understand the point made before about keeping cameras off and keeping most questions till the end. However, the one thing I do like to do as part of any workshop, whether we're doing this face-to-face or whether we're doing it virtually as we are now, is to try and keep it as interactive as possible. And medicine is quite an interactive pursuit. So there will be some questions asked, which please do use the chat function to answer them as much as you can within there too. But the first thing I need you to do, please, is to grab yourself a bit of paper and a pen, because you'll need those as you go through. So just give you 30 seconds to grab yourself a piece of paper and a pen if you don't already have one. While you do that, let me introduce myself properly. My name is James Barton. I'm one of the directors at MPW, but specifically towards the medical side of things. I run the medical program here, have done for about the last 10 years, and have written various instructional guides on terms of how you get into universities in the UK, as well as actually interviewing for medical schools too. So hopefully I've got one or two things I can say of use to you. So if you've got yourself a piece of paper and a pen, let's make this quite simple to start with. If you've done anything with me before, maybe you've seen something like this. If you haven't, it will be new for the first time, but I want you to do something really simple for me to start with. And there's a very good point to it, which comes up later on, but I'd like you to draw me the human body. Now, this isn't a doctor's test, it's not a biology test, it's actually a game played when you're children. What I want you to do is to draw the head of a body. Once you've done that, I want you to fold it over at the mid-neck part. If you've ever done this game as a child, it's quite an interesting one to do. The next thing I want you to do is to draw the body of this human figure, but now without seeing the head. So you fold it over to the mid-neck, you're now drawing the body of this person. Then once you've done that, you folded it over at the top of the thighs, and now you're going to draw the legs in there as well. And I want you to fold it over at the end, at the ankles. So you cut off the ankles there too. And then right after you've done that, and you can carry on doing it whilst I'm talking here, but after that, I'd like you to write a description. In the end, you're going to get something that looks a little bit like this. That one-line description I want you to write underneath is what you see when you see this body, okay? What you see, what you want to describe this person as, okay? One sentence to describe what you have just drawn. Nice and simple, nice and straightforward, and we'll come round to it later. Right, anything to do with medicine, we need to warm you up. First, we need to warm up your brain so that actually you're receptive towards it. And here's the first question of the day for anyone. Look at the 2 coins there. I have 2 coins in my pocket that add up to £1.10. One of them is not a 10p piece. Please, anyone out there, what are the coins that I have in my pocket? Nice and straightforward. 2 coins. I have 2 coins in my pocket that add up to £1.10. One of them is not a 10p piece. So what are the coins, please? And I need people to feel bold and to feel brave in all of this. I'll give you the answers anyway, but the bolder and the braver you become with these, it's the way of training. It's always to get something wrong. Get it right, get it wrong, we all learn at the same time. Does anyone have any answer to this question? Okay, in which case I'll count down from 10. and then I'll give you the answer to it. But we are warming the brains up because the brains need to work in a certain way for what comes next in the medical application. So I have 2 coins in my pocket that add up to £1 10p. One of them is not a 10p piece. What are the coins? Well, one of them is a 10p piece, therefore, because the answer's in the question itself, and the other one is a £1. So you have 2 coins, £1 and a 10p piece. So sometimes things seem more complicated than they are, and it often resembles in quite a neat way what this medical school application actually is. You can overcomplicate it if you're not reading the questions properly. And these sorts of questions come about in the testing that you have to consider for universities, for medical schools. Right, let's do something else. Let's do this. Have you seen the 9-dot exercise before? This will be so straightforward for you, but it comes in 2 parts, so it might not be that straightforward for you. You have 9 dots on a piece of paper, please, ladies and gentlemen. If you can please draw what you see in front of you. And then I would like you to connect all 9 of those dots using only 4 lines. The line can be vertical, it can be horizontal, it can be diagonal, but your pen must not leave that paper at any point. Okay? 9 dots, 4 lines, straight, horizontal, vertical, diagonal, never curved, but that pen cannot leave the paper at any point. First question, can you solve it? If you've done it before, it'll be easy. If you haven't done it before, really read the question here. Once you've done it, if you've done it, please just put yes or done it or got it in the chat box, so at least I know that someone out there is doing it. I've even got someone doing it live for me on Zoom at this moment in time. Generally speaking, if you have a question like this, and we use it quite often when we're training, you have about 2 minutes to answer it. And we're going to ask you questions while you do it. We ask you to tell you about our childhood or sing us a song, your childhood, not our childhood. Sing us a song, tell us a story, read us something from the news at that moment in time, trying to distract you all the time while trying to fix this particular puzzle. Because ultimately, the ability to multitask is one that a doctor needs. Has anyone got it before I show you the solution? At some points, we will break the silence, I'm sure, but here we go. For anyone who hasn't got it so far, at no point in that question were you asked just to stay within the lines. And if you take the lines beyond the actual borders themselves, you manage to fix the puzzle. Because at face value, that puzzle is not one that you can solve. But in anything, if you try and now consider yourself to be a doctor and a doctor training, it is about taking the information that you have, assimilating it, developing it, and trying to come up with a solution. Try and reimagine that all doctors are in some ways detectives. You will only ever get the information that people give you. What's the one biggest problem to medicine nowadays? I mean, there's lots, but the one biggest one. If you're a patient going into the doctor's surgery, what do you think the problem is that the doctor faces? The problem is Dr. Google, because by the time people generally tend to have gone in to see a doctor nowadays, they've already self-diagnosed themselves. They've already decided what it is that is wrong. And often the trick of the doctor is having to unpick what it is that people think is wrong, try and find out what is actually correct, and then try and find a solution to it. So often trying to think around the parameters you're given is the only way of coming up with the actual answer. Now, if we were to do the same thing again, can you solve this particular puzzle by using only 3 lines? Can you do it by using only 3 lines? And to anyone out there, you can put a yes, you can put a no into the box. Just give me some feedback. Do you think you can solve this connecting all 9, but using just 3 lines? Okay, well, I'm arguably going to tell you that it is possible to do. Okay, it is, the puzzles confuse you. Good, well, puzzles are designed to confuse you, Mr. Phillips, which is the whole point of having a puzzle in the first place. You can, of course, you can do it. It's just about, if you take the information I gave you before and you listen to what I'm saying, you're not trying to find the solution on face value. You're trying to find a solution beyond the parameters of what you've been given. So if you were actually to extend it this way, and you take the lines even further, the answer to everything is anything is conceivably possible. You just have to find the solution. Hence what we're looking at with a medical school application. So now your brains are suitably warmed up. Even Mr. Phillips's brain is suitably warmed up at this point in time. And we hit ourselves nice and early on with the medicine myth, which is this. Generally speaking, 12% of applicants get into medical school, and about 5% of those are European or indeed international. Those are roughly the right numbers, I suppose, within there. But out of all the applicants applying for medical school at this point, the point really stands that most people don't know how to put together the application properly. So while the numbers seem low, if you know what you're doing, you're going to land within those percentage numbers versus the people who don't, which make up the bulk of applications. And that's why the numbers actually are as low as they actually do seem. So try and dismiss percentages and stats and numbers as lies, damn lies, and statistics, and focus on why it is you want to go into medicine. And that generally helps us more. In the grand scheme of things, international applicants coming across, you nearly have about 9,500, 10,000 international applicants. But what is quite a low number, and it's quite a low number because it's not generally considered by medical schools in the UK that you have the appropriate background, the appropriate grounding in your academic system to take you on to be successful within the first couple of years of the medical course, which is why we then try and bring you across and do A-levels first or do a foundation course first, something that prepares you a little bit better and puts you in a different bracket when you're applying to the university. So it's no longer now strictly about your nationality, and we can forget and just answer questions later about Brexit and international visas and all these things that have impacts on your application. Instead, actually coming across and doing something in the English system first, A-levels or foundation, gives you a much better opportunity to go forward. Simply put, that is the case. Domestic applicants, just so you know, we have about 60,000, maybe 55, 60,000 people who apply year on year, and about 8,000 to 9,000 of those get in. So the numbers are more heavily weighted, but still, it's still quite a low percentage of people going into it. But the key, the absolute key, is the NHS needs you. And in this time of what we've all gone through recently, more than ever, we need doctors, and we need good doctors to come through. And in recognition of that, the government, the NHS, the universities themselves keep bringing online more and more places and more opportunities for students to come to the UK and to study medicine over here, because we need you. Simply put, we need you. And that's really why we want to make sure this application goes as smoothly as it possibly can do. And here you go. I mean, the news will always give you something. The media reports something all the time, but record numbers of students are accepted onto medicine courses year on year now, which shows that this whole thing about the NHS needing you and more places being put on is absolutely the case, because the data is now supporting exactly that. More and more places are available for you. But it's not a race, and I want you to consider this. It's not a race to the finish line. We don't want to rush through this application. It's actually more of an auction. You have about 36 medical schools that you're going to be able to look at, and we're not talking even about the private universities here. It becomes more of an auction as to, are you right for that particular place? Are you wrong for that place? We need to consider all the different places first, consider what sort of place is right for you. But the underlying point that you need to consider from the outset is you need to know why it is you want to do it. Now, standardly, in the UK system, we do A-levels, and A-levels are the gold standard of what takes you onto university from there. 2 years of A-levels done between the ages of 16 and 18, or in fact, you can do 1 year A-levels, and for some people who have finished high school in their own countries, they can come across, do a 1 year A-level if they're at the right academic level, and then apply to university after that. To be really clear, the 1 year A-levels are exactly the same as the 2 year A-levels. They are just done in a more streamlined fashion. And by implication, you're doing 2 years combined into one. They are good when you are considering the difference between a foundation course and A-levels themselves. So foundation courses are also possible for you, but they are not generally the right route if you want to go into medicine itself. And I'll come round to that one. Let's just stick to A-levels for a moment. To take A-levels, you're doing them in 3 subjects. Chemistry is the prerequisite requirement for medicine. And generally speaking, you always need 2 sciences, although there are some rules around that that don't always apply. But generally 2 sciences. So biology should be the other one, and then a 3rd subject. Most people elect to take maths. Is it necessary? No, it isn't. There is enough maths within the science-based syllabuses themselves that mean you don't have to have maths as one of your requirements. But if you are actually applying for somewhere like Oxbridge or Imperial, then mathematics becomes more necessary. What I would rather see, and have always found more interesting when interviewing medical students, is someone who has something different as their 3rd subject, and it can be anything. Often what makes it more interesting is if someone comes in with art, or indeed music, or geography, or history, or something else like that, because they are interested in it and they enjoy it. And critically, it also gives them another skill set. If you think of art, art often trips people up when you say, look, what is it about art that crosses over to medicine? Well, if you ask a doctor or a surgeon generally what they are they a scientist? They generally turn around and say, no, we're artists. Because generally what they do is they come up with creative solutions to problems. And it's the skill that they have with their hands and the creativity of their thought that means that there is a good link between medicine and art. In fact, if you've ever been to a hospital recently, and hopefully you haven't, but particularly the hospitals in the UK, you'll see an abundance of art within the hospitals themselves. The corridors are like art galleries as you walk down and see pictures upon pictures upon pictures, because art is therapeutic. It calms people down. And hospitals are not just there to deal with the patients, they are also having to cater for the families and the loved ones and the friends who are coming to see others who are in pain. And things like music and art actually really lay heavily towards helping with that. And music, of course, gives you a manual dexterity-based skill and the ability to multitask. So a 3rd subject, just take something that you're going to enjoy, because A-levels teach you the skills that you're going to need to cope at university themselves. Now, is it better to do A-levels or foundation? It's a very easy answer. The answer is always A-levels. If you don't have what you need at this moment to enter into university, if I can give you the advice, always go towards A-levels, because 1, I think they give you a greater grounding in scientific background to go on to university. And indeed, 2, they are recognized by all the universities that you might be looking to apply to. Whereas with a foundation course, the same is not true. And you don't always have an appropriate foundation course in order to take you onto medicine. There are some subtleties with that. Something like the NC UK does a medicine stream that allows you onto a couple of universities there, the medical schools, but even those medical schools tend to be English accredited medical schools, but outside of the UK borders themselves. You can, in some cases, do a foundation course as part of a longer degree course, a 6-year course at university in itself. Those are found in fewer locations. They can be a good thing to do, but at the same time, do remember, it's not an automatic guarantee that you're going to go straight onto the medical course if you pass that foundation year. You still have to pass it to a good level, and often you get more support in the A-level system than you do in the university foundation system. So you've got to decide on who you are, what you want, and how quickly you're going to be able to get there, and then see which one balances up. But if I can give you a steer, A-levels generally tend to be the right route. There's something as well in the English system called the EPQ, which we like to champion. If you don't know what that is, it's called the Extended Project Qualification. It's like an undergraduate piece of work. It's a dissertation, your voice, your opportunity to write about something within the medical field that will be able to potentially get you ahead of the rest of the candidates in the pile. They like to be able to see that you can research independently, because a lot of that is what you have to do as a medical school student, to go and pick a topic. Generally with the EPQ, you can do it on what you like, but if you're applying to medicine, it's a good idea to keep it to something medically related and to keep it academic within there, because universities will look at it, consider it, and certainly read it at the very top end. If you're not doing the A-level route and you want to do a foundation route, or you're not even doing that route, you're just applying, I would recommend you do this on your own anyway. It doesn't need to be formally assessed. It is just your own academic piece of research into something medically related, whatever it is that that might indeed be. So the application process really starts with us assessing what your goals and your aspirations are. The next step, which is quite critical, is that you get the work experience in place in order to be able to understand if this is the right route for you. Then we'd go through regular meetings in order to mentor you, get you to open days, get you to come up with a short list of universities, select which universities between UCAT and BMAT, all of these things we're going to talk about, the personal statement side of things, you finish your applications, and then we're doing interviews. So it is a long process, as you can see, but that is the MPW stage methodology that we like to use. Now, there's different types of courses in the UK, generally fitting into 3 categories. You've got the traditional based courses there, generally only done nowadays in Oxbridge, Imperial. It's just based upon more on the academic theory of medicine, and the practical application tends to become a little bit later on. The more common based route becomes starting to be more practically based. It's actually the integrated one at the bottom here. The integrated courses are a blend between the traditional and these things above called the PBLs, the problem-based or case-based learning courses that we have here. The problem-based learning courses are fascinating for anyone who is more that way inclined, in the sense that you are given topics to go away and research, possibly even before you're taught them in small groups, and then to come back and to present with a teacher realigning you as you go. It's a far more practically engaged way of learning, but the majority of universities look at those integrated courses, so we need to work out who you are and what kind of course it is you're actually interested in doing there. Now, we talked about work experience before. Generally, any work experience is good. We've just come through the COVID years, as we're going to now nickname them. The COVID years prevented most people from getting any sort of work experience at all, but the more creative people still managed to get work experience in there. We still have categories that we have to fulfill, because ultimately they show that you are ready and you have considered what it is to be a doctor. So whether you're going down an A-level or foundation route, the same system always applies, which is now why we're dwelling on it. The biggest one, of course, is the hospital-based experience. It shows that you've gone, considered, seen the blood, seen the sick, seen the drama and the trauma and the tears and everything, and you understand what it is to be in what is a very stressful environment. Then we look at other categories within there. The GP work, so actually going and shadowing a general practitioner. Some work with the children and with the elderly, because what you're then able to see is the degeneration of the mind over the years. So how you consider how you actually treat an old person versus treating a child. You tend to find that you talk to them in the same way. You slow your speech down. You make it more animated, something along those lines. Am I going to talk about other courses like photography? I will talk more specifically on other subjects if you like, but always keeping it relevant to the medicine side of things. So I will pick up on that one in a bit, Stefan. And a difficult environment, something where you've been able to actually emphasize what it is to deal with people. People are horrible at times. Working in a bar, working in a cafe, working in a shop, working in a call center, where people are rude. Why is that important? Because as doctors, we need to develop our bedside manner and be able to deal not only with the patient, but also about the families that come through as well. Now, with work experience, I want you to keep a journal as you go. Every time you do something, I want you to note down what it is you learned from it, because it is not a shopping list. It is talking specifically about what it is that you want to do, or what it is you've learned from that experience, I should say. What could you have done in light of COVID if you couldn't have gone through? Well, actually, some of the universities have started to pioneer more interactive based work experiences. And there's a few links here, and you can have the links afterwards as well. Do follow them, because they give you the opportunity to learn online. And while it's not absolutely the same as being face to face, it is also very useful, because all you're doing is analyzing what it is you've taken from that particular experience. And YouTube is often the most powerful resource in this world now, because anything you want to find, you can find on there. Whether it's actually watching a surgery, and it's quite macabre to do that sort of thing, but you can watch a surgery, and what you're actually taking from it is what you see, even if you're not there. Sometimes actually videoing it can get you closer to the action, as it were. Read widely. I need you to read as well to understand the National Health Service in the UK, which is quite wonderful in its own way. It's stretched to the limits, but it does do a lot of things very well. So we need you to understand about it, about the history of it, about the free healthcare that is there for so many, many people. And again, keep a journal as you go. Read about current events, read about current diseases, try and understand the bigger diseases that keep coming up. COVID is obviously something to consider within there, but there are so many others that are now getting pushed to the background because of the big ones that are right there. But the more you know, the more armed you are, not only for your application, but in terms of being a doctor as well. Knowledge and information doesn't leave you. Knowledge is power, and it's absolutely king in anything to do with medicine. Do use the BBC website as well as almost a gateway website to all these sorts of topical issues. There's a whole health section on there. It's a very good place to start, but make sure your reading goes through. And the other thing I'd like you to do is buddy up. If you've got friends who are wanting to go into medicine, find someone else to talk to about these things. Set yourselves a little challenge. Grab a coffee every day and talk about something that you've read. The more you talk, the better the interview will be later on, and the more your understanding will absolutely embed in. So once we've done that, once we've gone through all the universities, we've found the short list of where you want to go, you've done the work experience, you're reading widely, once you know which universities they are that you wish to follow, to apply to, then you need to see which tests that they are looking for. We like to try and push people towards one or the other, because otherwise your whole life just becomes tests. But there are people who want to do both the UCAT and the BMAT in there. The UCAT is based more on the way your brain thinks in its own way. It looks at verbal reasoning, decision-making, quantitative reasoning, abstract reasoning, and situational judgments. There's lots of different tests within there. It's a very clever test. It adapts itself to you as you move through. So you can never really get a sense as to how you're doing, because the next question is based upon the level that you gave or the level of answer that you gave before that. So it's constantly evolving and constantly adapting itself within that clever test. It gives you a result, a number at the end, and depending on that number depends on which university really you're able to look at. The earlier you do that in the process, the more you're able to select the universities. The later you do that in the process, you just need to be aware that you're not 100% sure whether the mark you've got is going to be applicable to that university or not, because it's all based upon the national average. That can be sat between the 1st of July to the 6th of October, whereas the BMAT, which is more of a scientific test and requires more scientific and mathematically based knowledge, that's done in a one-off sitting. There are 2 sittings, but please ignore the first one because it's not really for first-time applicants. Do take it in the second sitting, or the normal sitting, which is right at the back end of October, the start of November. So this year it's on the 3rd of November. The following year it will be on the 2nd. And practice. Practice is what you have to do here. These aren't tests that you can revise for, but they are ones you absolutely 100% can practice in great depth for. So again, some links here for you to follow. Do some of the online testing on these sorts of things. The more you do, the better it will be, because it's about learning the timing to it as well. When you're applying, we basically split up into a pie chart where the actual application is won and lost. So if you look at the pie chart, the blue section there is the interview, which forms quite a great part of the actual judgment of you as a candidate. The admission score is weighted almost in exactly the same way. So those aptitude tests are critical that you get them right. The exam grades form a then decent proportion, although a lesser proportion, because everyone is generally expected to get the A's and the A-star grades, or to be at the top end of that foundation course. And everything else, which includes the personal statement, which includes the application, which includes the work experience, it is a lesser part, but still an important part to it. So do consider where this application is won and lost. And in the first wave, it's going to be won and lost with the aptitude test. So practice, practice, practice. When you're preparing for the BMAT, at the moment, these are the BMAT universities. They tend to be the more traditionally minded ones. Certainly, there are some of the ones in London there too. They tend to be the ones that are most subscribed, and they're going to be following a more scientific-based background in the early years. Now, just to give you a bit of a sense, you've got 3 sections to a BMAT test. We won't do them. I might give you a practice question here, but we won't do them in length because that's a whole different type of training, and happy to do that at another time. But you've got three sections. The first section is based upon an hour. The following two sections are half an hour based each. And you're looking at everything from problem solving and understanding arguments all the way through to essay writing and the assimilation of the information in front of you and how you actually can persuasively get your argument across. Let me give you one then. Let me give you a problem solving question here. If you have a look at the screen in front of you, can you address and solve this particular BMAT-based question? Okay. Password is used to open a safe in a hotel room, and it uses an array of 5 names in a particular order selected from the names of the owner's family. And they are Rick, Betty, Oscar, Gavin, Yasmin, Graham, and Bertha. In any password, a name can only be used once, and no 2 names with the same starting letter are indeed allowed. Jeremy is trying to remember the password he set and tries Betty, Rick, Oscar, Gavin, and Yasmin. The safe doesn't open because whilst the 2nd, 4th, and 5th names are correct, the 1st and 3rd names are wrong. So, ladies and gentlemen, which of these can be the correct combination to open the safe? There is absolutely no concern over putting something in the chat box here because you only have to put in A, B, C, D, or E. No judgment attached. Which is the correct combination to open the safe? Remember, a lot of these things are about the information that's in front of you. Consider yourself as a doctor who's been given a lot of information, and now they need to absolutely pick up on the right points within there in order to solve the problem that they've been given. In all of this, you're also under a time pressure. Your time pressure of 2 minutes whittles away. So you're under pressure in order to be able to work this one out, but all the information you might need is on the screen in front of you. Remember, the 2nd, 4th, and 5th names are correct, so that whittles it down already for you. So Rick, Oscar, and Yasmin are already in the right place. Sorry, Rick, Gavin, and Yasmin, I should say. Does anyone have the answer? Okay, because we'll be at the end of the time pressure already, the answer to it is E, okay? Oscar, Rick, Bertha, Gavin, and Yasmin, okay? 2nd, 4th, and 5th names are already in place. We know that one. The password, the name can only be used once, and no 2 names with the same starting letter are allowed, so we can dismiss everything else within there. There we go. So E is the right answer. Damalola, you came right through at the end. Well done. We've got it. Okay. Then you have something more scientific, as we said. So the following statements relate to the flow of blood to the heart. Okay, you've got 4 statements about it, and this question asked you exactly that. Okay, sorry, let's go back then if you're trying to work out which one it is here. So work it through. 2nd, 4th, and 5th names are already in place. So anything with Rick, Gavin, and Yasmin, we already know are absolutely embedded in. So that already gives us everything there. But you can't have anything with it, so the name can only be used once, and no 2 names with the same starting letter are allowed within that. So that would immediately take out which ones? It would take out C within the equation. What else would it do? If we go back to it, Betty and Bertha have the same start. Absolutely, they do. The only combination that works to it, Oscar, Rick, Bertha, Gavin, and Yasmin, is the only combination that works to the rules set above. The safe doesn't open unless, in any password, a name can only be used once, and no 2 names with the same starting letter would be allowed. So B is out because Gavin and Graham are in there. C is out because Betty and Bertha are there. D is out because Graham and Gavin are in there, which leaves a shootout between Oscar and Bertha within there for the starting bit. But we already know that it can't be A because Oscar, he tried in that position to start with. Jeremy tried that one and it was in the wrong place. So it can't be the third name. So the only one that's applicable is E, where Oscar is at the start. Oscar, Rick, Bertha, Gavin, and Yasmin. Does that now make sense? Because if you look here, Oscar's here in the third place. It can't be here in the third place as well. So it has to be here in the first place. Jolly good. Okay, so then you have four of these statements, and you're trying to work out which of these statements is correct. So if anyone who knows biology within there, and I won't dwell because of time on all of these things, then ultimately you'd be looking through these and trying to work out which one is correct here. And the correct answer, and you can do these in your own time as much as anything, the correct answer we'd be directing you towards here is 3 and 4 only, okay? So you have to work through the scientific base. You need to know a bit more GCSE biology and chemistry in the first year of A-level as opposed to complete A-level knowledge. And then you have the essay-based questions. And some of these questions are quite open-ended. There is money to be made from not curing disease. What do you think about this particular statement? What is meant and to what extent? Okay. So lots of different things come up in the whole questions. It's trying to look at the way you think, the way you reason, the way you construct an argument together. And these are things that we can train you on as much as anything. But you need to give full answers, logical presentations, and just make good pertinent points as we go through. In all of these tests, you just got to make sure you're reading at every point and calculating intelligently and writing legibly. The legibly part is critical. Doctors have appalling handwriting, but now is not the time to start being an appalling handwriter. Now is the time to write legibly so we can actually all understand what it is you're putting through, because otherwise it's an immediate mark off, which isn't what you want, okay? So have a look through the BMAT website, grab yourself a copy of the specification, download past papers, work through them online, and the same applies to the UCAT as well. Here is the UCAT universities. There's far more of them in there. If you're being strategic in your application, you're picking all your universities either off the BMAT list or off that UCAT list, and then just trying to veer towards which ones that you are most interested in that. The UCAT, as we said, there's far more that goes into it. There's far more based on the time pressures that go into those as well. I've actually broken it down here so you can understand it a little bit more too. So lots of sections to make up the whole. It's still 2 hours long, but you have just quicker times that you need to consider. Don't worry about the time management issues, okay? But ultimately, you're going to need to complete as many as possible in order to get the highest possible score, okay? We don't really have the time to go through questions on this too, so I will defer to later on these ones, but I will give you this one to start with. One of the abstract reasoning questions that you will ever get is you're given a picture on the right hand side of the screen there, and you get 2 data sets in front of you. You're asked to tell which group that particular individual picture on the right hand side of the screen belongs to, set A or set B. As a quick question in here so we can move forwards, does anyone know which group that would belong to and why? Set A, set B, or neither? It is indeed set A. Sorry, Damalola, it's not B. It is indeed set A. Can you tell me why it is set A? Good. I mean, everyone's getting set A in there now, which is great. The reason being, I'll just tell you before anyone has time to type it. If you consider everything in set A, it has a curved edge. Okay. If you consider everything in set B, it has a straight edge. Absolutely, because it consists of curves. Therefore, the picture belongs to set A and not to set B. Never get confused by the colors. Never get, those are just designed to throw you off, or the numbers of shapes within there. Try and look for the most obvious reason and move straight on to the next question. As I say, there's lots of questions that go into the UCAS and BMAT, and we can do a whole training for anyone who wants to be a doctor at another point, okay? Because there are so many questions and so many examples, but for now, we need to move on to the interview. And the interview is the most exciting part of the medical application for me. Some prefer the work experience because obviously it gives you the opportunity to investigate medicine a little bit more. For me, it's all won and lost in the interview itself, and you need to enjoy the experience. Some universities, and the fewer universities now, they still use the panel-based interview where you have a few persons in the room asking you questions directed from your application, but asking you more questions about medicine itself. But the more common one nowadays is something called the multiple mini interview, these MMIs. And they are still used for whenever you're applying to university, whether it's going to be A-levels or foundation courses into the course itself. When you're preparing for your interview, you need to reflect on what you've actually written in your personal statement. I despair and absolutely lose the plot a little bit when someone hasn't actually remembered what they wrote in their personal statement itself, because ultimately that's your starting point. And it doesn't prove that you wrote it yourself if you can't remember what is said. So one of the most common questions is just talk me through your personal statement. Give me a bit of a sense as to who you are to start with. And so do make sure you've read it back through. In that personal statement, as we'll find out in a moment, you're going to reflect on your work experience and your voluntary work, and you're actually going to be able to talk about that in the interview itself. You're going to have read widely, so you can bring in lots of caveats of information into the actual interview itself. And try and learn about medical ethics too. Medical ethics are a huge part of a medical course, but they are definitely a huge part of the interview process. Discuss your thoughts with a friend, with a family member. I've mentioned before about buddying up. The other great thing to do is buddy up with someone who has no interest in medicine or no understanding of science. And your job is to get them interested, to get them engaged with what it is you are talking about and what it is you're saying. And if you can convince them, then you'll be able to convince an interviewer, because it's based upon your skills to be persuasive, okay? So what's involved in an MMI? Well, generally you have about 6 to 8 stations, 40 minutes in length to be in there. It's the speed dating of the medical world as much as anything. So you've got all these different stations that handle everything from the medical and scientific through to giving instructions, receiving instructions, hand-to-eye coordination, justifying decisions, medical ethics, role play. So sometimes they bring actors into play in order to be able to give you something, and you have to react to whatever the actor is giving you. So the actor plays a patient or the actor plays a doctor, and you have to respond accordingly. And then to have a bit of a chat about the NHS in there too, to show that you've understood. I would ask you who the health secretary was, but he only changed 2 days ago, so it'd be a bit unfair of us to do that to you. But generally speaking, that always catches out students in there too. So we'll move quickly beyond that point. So look, the first class task, let's have a look at some of these MMIs because they're more exciting. In the picture in front, write down what you think you see. Say what you see. Remember, you have 2 minutes at this station. You'll be handed a picture. Scientific-based question. What do you see? Firstly, what is this slide? Does anyone know? What is this slide? You see blood cells. It is indeed blood cells. That's absolutely right. Is this a normal picture? Are there any anomalies within the blood cells? So if you've identified this as a cross-section of a blood cells sample here, what you might also notice, there we are, sickle cell. So you have a cell within there. So what you're getting candidates to do, and I should really remove that bit at the bottom so that you can't see it as much as anything, but what you will also be able to notice is the anomaly within there. So we do have a cell that is in the shape of a sickle, and then what you want your candidates to do is to start talking about whether they can identify that it is sickle cell anemia, and then you have a bit more of a discussion based on sickle cell anemia within the timescale that you have. Let the interviewer be the person who leads you. Your job is indeed to say what you see. So well done. So there is an abnormality there. One thing I'd ask you to do in your own time is, have you ever tried explaining something to someone which is a very basic, very simplistic action? Often this is done with shoelaces. It can be done with a tie. I quite like to do it with an omelette or a cooking question as well. Have you ever tried to take a really simplistic day-to-day action and then explain it to someone? Because when we take things for granted, it dulls our ability to be able to actually communicate it effectively. So your job will be to take a family member, take a friend, and ask them to tie their shoelace, but they can only do it responding to the actions or the instructions that you give them. So in an interview, the interviewer will ask you to explain to them how to tie the shoelace. They will only tie their shoelace based on the very specific instructions that you give them. So take the shoelace, take the tie, take a cooking example, and try and do that. And it goes back to this idea whereby in medical training, we have to be very, very assertive with and clear with the directions that we are given, because often a doctor can't see what they're doing, but they rely on the team around them. So we need to talk about the clarity of directions within that. Okay. This one I quite like as well. It's lots of things are always based upon children's games. Why? Because at that time we learned to take things as they were, as opposed to overcomplicating things. And this is often the case of what we need to do in medical training as well. So you might have a spot the difference puzzle here. Can you spot all the differences in this particular picture? How many are there? Mustafa, do you not know how to answer this question or the one before based upon the shoelaces? If it's the one before there is only one difference. There should be lots of differences in this picture. I'll give you a steer. There's 6 differences on this particular picture that we have. And again, the reason for having spot the difference based exercises is it's trying to get you to identify what you see in front of you, and can you see all the signs? Absolutely. See if we can do all these. So look, if we look at the picture now, we have the button on the lady on the left. We have the smile on the lady in the picture. We have the person in the middle with the fringe. We have the baby with the curl on the head. We have the 2 eyes too narrow on the gentleman on the right. And we also have the nose missing and the nose present on the lady on the far right. So what we have is 6 differences within there. It sounds simple, but the quicker you do things, the more likely you are to make mistakes. We're teaching you to actually be observant within a time scale. And then you'll have something on justifying decisions. This can sometimes be based on a camping exercise. It can be based upon if you were going to university, what would you take with you? But it's about justifying the decisions as to why you would do something. It's this idea of and so what. Every time you say something, you've got to be able to actually justify why it is that you think it and why you would do something. If you can't justify it, particularly in medical terms, don't do it. Ethics and role plays are a very big thing, and something I actually quite enjoy training people on as much as anything. And I will ask you this. You see your best friend stealing from a supermarket. What do you do? Does anyone feel brave enough to actually put an answer into the box or even talk to me live here? But you see your friend stealing from a supermarket, your best friend. What do you do at that moment in time? This is often done in a role play based scenario. What would you do? What sort of things would you consider? Report the person. Okay, but this is your best friend. Would you automatically report your best friend for stealing? You might do, absolutely. It shows that you've got a good moral compass. But would you report the person for stealing? Get them to put it back. Absolutely. You would try. Good. Well, look, I'm glad you would report straight away. But the one thing I'll say to you is if you report the person straight away, what would you say if there was a problem with your friend that you didn't know about. So you reporting them actually made things a lot worse. It made things worse for that person, and then they might find themselves injured further down the line, or they might find themselves getting involved in violence or aggression or depression or something like that. Do you not think that instead of reporting the person straight away, you might actually want to guide them to the fact that they should put it back? You've identified it's there. You might give them a warning to start with and say, look, I know what you're doing. Don't do it. Otherwise, I will have to take the action. If you go straight to the extremity, what if that person's deeply unhappy? What if they're depressed? What if there is something seriously wrong with them medically? What if something's happened to their family member at home and you don't know about it, and this is just their act of rebellion? You might be causing them more harm by just reporting them straight away. If you go to the other extreme and you pay for the item for them, then you're just actually condoning the fact that they are stealing, and therefore you're never going to teach them a lesson. They're never going to stop. Talking to them is all you can do. Guiding them, advising them, and saying, look, giving them that warning to start with, and trying to get them to open up to you a little bit more. And in the role play, you hand them supermarket security. Okay, look, in the role play, what you're going to try and do is try and get the actor to actually talk back to you in terms of trying to discuss why it is that they're doing that. This is your best friend. They've never stolen before. Why it is they're doing this. Is there something else going on? Is it the fact they have no money, in which case lend them the money and pay for the item? Is it the fact that there is something more serious? Is it just the fact that this is a path that they're going down, in which case you can then hand them on to supermarket security? But nothing is ever black and white. And I really want to stress that to anyone in these applications. Nothing is ever black and white. You need to consider everything that's going on in the picture around you. It is never just that straightforward. And if you just give those straightforward answers, you shut the interview down. Whereas what we're trying to get you to do is to talk. So don't shut it down, don't sit on the fence, talk and try and get the other person to open up. You're a doctor trying to get your patient to open up, okay? You might have a station on drug calculations. Again, time-wise, we probably won't end up doing this, but your chemistry knowledge, your mathematical knowledge will definitely come into play in the interview processes itself. And the encouragement is, when you're preparing for your interview, to do some drug calculations in there as well. Do them with a teacher, do them with a friend. Just make sure that you're able to calculate quickly within that. One other one for you, and then I'll just do the application stage for you, and we'll move to questions. But the other one that I really quite like is the ethical scenarios that we do within here. And the one that's commonly used, or I've always commonly used it, is the example over who you give something to. So in this situation, a 64-year-old alcoholic and a 14-year-old girl both require a new liver. Completely implausible situation, but suspend your disbelief for a moment. The old man is one, or the 64-year-old man is one place ahead of the 14-year-old girl in the queue in order to get the new liver. But he has already had 2 stints in rehab already and had a new liver before and still not reformed his alcoholic ways, okay? Both patients require this new liver to live. So we only have a day to play with here. You've got to make a judgment call one way or another. 64-year-old man who's been through rehab twice, still not reformed his ways, he's still alcoholic, versus a 14-year-old girl who needs this liver as well, simply to live. So who do we give the liver to? The 64-year-old, Damaloli, you said, has lived his life. So you'll give it to the 14-year-old girl. Fine. Does anyone else agree with that? Or disagree with that? $64-year-old man or 14-year-old girl? Who gets the liver? Simple question. Who gets the liver? $14-year-old girl. You know what? Everyone always says this, and it's fine. It's about the ability to be able to give your opinion across. But my cross-examination and counter to you is, if you give the liver to the 14-year-old girl, do you not feel bad about the fact you've just condemned the 64-year-old man to death? Because you've now made a decision as to who lives and who dies. Whereas someone's rightly just put on the chat there from Omatola, the first person on the waiting list, 100%. Your job as a doctor is to treat the patient. Your job is not to play God. Your job is not to decide who lives, who dies, who gets this, who gets that. You can only treat based on bureaucracy, i.e. who's on the list, and they'll just be put in front of you. If you start obeying to sentiment, you're opening yourself up to all sorts of cross-examination that come into all of this based upon, is sentiment a good thing in medicine? Do you think you need to be sentimental and sympathetic as a doctor? Empathy is right, but can you draw the distinction between empathy and sympathy? Why is it that you're always going for the younger girl when actually the other person's a human being as well? Your judgment on how he's lived his life is not relevant. Your job as a doctor, not someone to judge someone else. This isn't the media. We're not looking at that. Your job is care. And the Hippocratic Oath says that care is your primary function. So it opens up all different channels. Be careful never to slip into the sentimental category. Right, fine. And one other famous question, which we won't do, but what is wrong with the NHS? Is the NHS not just a victim of its own success? And I want you to consider that as well in all of your application building. What I really want you to know, though, is who are you, and to know it really well. I've used this example in anything from medicine through to law to architecture to creative thinking. It doesn't matter. You've got to consider yourself as a commodity that you are selling to the university, and you've got to try and understand why it is that the university want you at the end of the day. And you're going to get that through research. So in terms of thinking yourself and trying to sell yourself, you're only ever going to be able to do that if you know what it is that they want. So read the websites, understand the course, understand whether it's the right course for you, and ask questions of the admissions teams at those universities, because the best applications are the ones that take the information and build it into the statements so you're actually selling yourself appropriately based upon things that they've already told you. It gets you that little bit further ahead. Considering always why you and not the person next to you who's making those decisions, you go back to this commodity idea, and they're looking for 4 categories in here essentially: commitment, the evidence of research, the future plans, and the suitable skills and qualities. Does anyone know which the most important of these 4 points is for medical applications? For some reason, this particular question always works in the same way. Some people will say commitment, some people will say future plans, and some people will say suitable skills and qualities. But absolutely, for medicine, the key is evidence. If you're going to say you've done something, you absolutely have to back it up, because medicine is one of the few courses you will truly be interviewed for. So you'll get cross-examined. So always consider this "and so what" example. Every time that you say something, you need to know why you're saying it. Otherwise, we just have this average personal statement. I want to do medicine because I like it at A level. Maybe you talked a little bit about your work experience, but it's more of a shopping list, and there's more about you as a person and all the other things you do than actually a contextual argument as to why you want to do the medicine itself. Whereas the excellent ones have really considered "and so what," and every single sentence is loaded with why they are saying it. You have more of an impactful opening. For medicine, it's very overused that people say something to do with "I was once ill," or "I saw a very sick family member," or something like that. Please veer away from that. Equally say, "My family are full of doctors." Veer away from that as well, because it starts looking like you're only doing it based upon sentimental reasons. What you need to find, and it might be true, but what you need to find is something a little bit more academic as to why you want to do it. And work experience is a really neat way of starting the personal statement. Most of this application itself is going to be based upon what you have learned and your journal that you've been making all the way through of different topics, different work experience traits. You're now bringing that into play when writing the personal statement. You can talk a little bit about career aspirations, but don't just say "I want to be a plastic surgeon," because you still have to go through several training seats first. And your personality is going to shine through in this personal statement. So if we go back to this guy that we drew at the start, the reason I use this with medical school students is because, 1, it's a human body, so it's relatable. But 2, it compartmentalizes how you should actually put together a statement itself. And if you consider anything as a as a reflection on the human body. And art does this quite a lot as well. You'll find if you learn about art and architecture alongside medicine, about how buildings are constructed and how they are built upon a resonance with the human body, it becomes relatable and it becomes absolutely fascinating. It cross links between different courses and different sectors, really stands you out as a candidate. But for now, if we're looking at a personal statement, consider yourself as your representation. Carve your own human body up into it. Basic human psychology says to us that the first thing your brain ever does is to make a judgment on someone before you've even met them. They make a judgment on the way someone looks or how they appear or whatever it is. It's only when they open their mouth that opinion then adds color and depth and level, and it changes in some way, develops. So consider your introduction, and then the body. The body of it is going to be the education. So what have you done educationally in order to get you to medicine? The scientific background. Find something from the course or find something from your studies from A-level or foundation that is relevant to wanting to study medicine and what particular module that is. The legwork, if you forgive the pun on the whole thing, but the legwork is the work experience and everything you're doing. Wider reading is not critical to medicine at all, but you can bring in other arguments about topics and research interests that you might have. How much we actually want to know about you and your extracurricular pursuits is summed up in your ankles and your feet, which is about 20% of this particular document. And then a description underneath. That one-line sentence I asked you to write before should be a summation of you, the candidate, and why it is that medicine is the be-all and end-all for you. These applications are important. I know on the pie chart it was only a small section that we had before, but still everything is important in its own way. If you just neglect it because it's only a small part of the application, you might find that that was the difference between you and another candidate. So take it properly seriously within the whole thing. And always champion these transferable skills in the English system. Be factual. Don't talk about your love and your passion and your honor and your dream and all of these sorts of things. It's completely irrelevant. Be very, very factual and to the point on the medical terminology. Use as much terminology as you can to show that this is something that you are preparing for. Particularly at MPW, when we teach biology or chemistry or something like that, we are making it relevant with terminology to the course in the future so that it becomes ingrained into you at an early stage. Keep things short and simple and let the content be the thing that impresses you, not the actual thesaurus-based use of words within there. And all the time consider and so what. Get someone to read it to you. Get your mate or your counselor or your tutor or someone, your family member, to sit down, read it, and at the end of every sentence ask you to say and so what. And while it be a tedious exercise for you, it will really pull out of you the ability to be able to be persuasive and know why you are writing something. Keep things short, straight to the point. You don't need to say in conclusion. It's not been an essay, okay? Some of the ones that have been absolutely hopeless, I will end on here for you to actually get a good sense as to what other people write in there. What is medicine? Well, I'm still learning. That's why I want to take it at university. I always enjoyed that one. All the way down to, I think I'll be a great doctor in the future. Well, if you can't spell, that's automatically going to be a discount on an application. So please make sure you've sense checked and you've read it. And these are gospel truth, the ones that have been received over the course of time. So do try and be sensible with these closing statements. But I think my favorite one I ever read was when someone wrote, beyond my interest in medicine, the usual preoccupations of any teenage boy, which are being an avid Oxford United fan, so a football club, that's an immediate no in there anyway, playing computer games, which actually is relevant to medicine because of the manual dexterity skill that you have now. So gentlemen, if you play, or ladies as well, but if you play computer games, it's actually very relevant to medicine nowadays as well. So put it in your application. But beyond being an avid Oxford United fan, playing computer games, being an accomplished guitarist in a band, and girls. So he's ticked lots of boxes towards the extent that he's listened about the music, the manual dexterity, he's done this, he's done that, he's given an opinion, but he doesn't need to point out that there's one point about going to university as well as the socializing aspect. For medicine, while it's generally considered that is going to be a part of what growing up and learning is, you don't try and make jokes and put them into applications. Keep this a very short thing. Personality comes through in terms of what you've done, not what you say. So something neat, like medicine is a career dedicated to learning. That is what drives me and what I look forward to being part of. It's short, it's simple, it's to the point, and we move on. Okay. And that, in a very long nutshell, is the application process. It's not complicated. It's just long. You've got to dedicate time to it. Medicine's only for the ambitious and the driven. But please don't make it too more difficult than it needs to be. You need to practice quite a lot for the UCAT and the BMAT. For everything else, ask people for help. If you really want to go, I'm going to steer you towards A-levels over foundation if you're not ready to go, because A-levels are the gold standard to get you in. Foundation courses have a place and a niche, but they are not the be-all and end-all, and they have a smaller category that you can apply to. Over and above that, thank you for joining in. Please take the presentation away and try some of these questions on your own. But do you have any questions I can answer for you now?
Thank you, James.
Pleasure.
Yeah. Tiga, are you there?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, so can you please move forward with the Q&A session and pick up all the questions from Zoom and YouTube?
Okay. So many thanks, James, for your presentation.
Pleasure.
Yeah, so the very first question I have here is from a student asking about engineering courses. Basically bonding around chemical and industrial engineering, if you also have options about that.
Sorry, what's the specific question? I beg your pardon. No, in terms of what the application process is behind them, or what you need, or what sort of things?
Yeah, so basically the application process and the availability of the courses.
Okay, so with engineering, there are a lot more examples and different courses that you can apply to. If you already know which type of engineering course, it does give you a bit more of a natural advantage because people like it more if you're being specific to those. If we're talking about most engineering courses, they all require maths within there. Most of them require physics. If you're doing chemical engineering, though, always that you're going to have to bring chemistry into play as well. The application is far more straightforward than the medical application. It still relies upon you having work experience because engineering is another lifelong pursuit. So you want to make sure that you can back it up with something you've done already to say that you've looked into it, you've explored it. It doesn't need to be as plentiful as the medical experiences have been, but you need to have something to cling on to within there and something to be able to write about. There's an awful lot of information out there almost daily about different engineering projects, different engineering techniques, those sorts of things. So the application really needs you to understand what is happening in those too. But the availability of courses in the UK is plentiful in terms of what there is and where it is. But it's a much less lengthy process. You have not until the 15th of October, like you do for the medical applications, you have until the deadline in January, on the 15th of January, in order to be able to properly work out where it is you want to go and to go off and do that then. So same application for most courses. It's a personal statement. It's good grade. Engineering will always be at the top end of the A-level bracket. If you're applying direct from country, again, it will be at the top end of your particular high school system for that. If you don't have what they require, there are more by way of engineering foundation courses than there are for medicine. So you can do an engineering-based foundation course and then go into the university beyond that point. All the time considering that when you do a foundation course, you still have to hit the requisite level in order to go on to that particular uni. But there are also college-based foundation courses, which are often just as good, if not better, when it comes to foundation programs, because they give more time and more help. Or there's the A-level route to do as well. But you need to have, in whatever, maths, physics, if it's chemical engineering, throw in chemistry as well.
Okay, thank you so much for that, James.
Pleasure. I'm happy to have an offline conversation there too, because engineering is something else that I can make useful to you.
Okay. All right. So the next one is, do you have guaranteed progression to university partners? The person is currently considering Newcastle University.
Do we as MPW have guaranteed progression?
Yes, yes.
No, there's never such a thing as guaranteed progression into medicine. What we do have is outstanding statistics which show that we are getting people into medical school. So generally, over the past sort of 5 years now, as it has been, we have about 30 applicants that go through, and we've never dipped below 27 out of those 30 going over to medical school afterwards. So the preparation, the grounding, the background is thorough, but you can't guarantee entrance into medical school because it's not how it works.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So the next question is, after quarantine upon arrival at the college, would the college also assist students in terms of those that might have missed a couple of lectures while they were during the quarantine? Is there a possibility of like a playback that they have access to?
Yes, 100%. I mean, the way the world has caught us all out, we have to make allowances for absolutely everything. And while we hope the quarantine rules are going to keep diversifying and changing and becoming better for people coming over, anything that anyone has missed, we will, of course, help them catch up on. Including in that, we won't just let people start having not done anything before. We will also be running a hybrid version of it for anyone who is needing to quarantine still. So there'll be an online way of following the courses alongside. So we as live, but then when they actually get there, will be helpful in terms of them catching up and their progress from that.
Thank you very much for that. So now the next question, just as a follow-up to that, is they're trying to confirm the current situation in terms of COVID and how the college is trying to handle the processes for its students.
Right, fair enough. So at this moment in time, we fully anticipate, as we have been now for a while, being back face-to-face teaching in September, provided, touch wood, there is no reversal. And at the moment, I don't know how much you've seen, but certainly from the 19th of July, things are changing once again within the UK and getting back to a sense of normality as much as anything else. When it comes to coming over, it depends on what the rules will be at that moment in time. But if we take it to what it has been before, when people have come over, they have to quarantine before coming into the college itself. The quarantine is done if they're coming over to stay with us, it's done in our halls of residence. But students are able to follow the courses online, and provision is made for them within the accommodation as well, i.e. food and things like that. So everything is there. Students won't lose time. They just need to make sure they come over. The advice is come over in advance of the course starting in order to make sure you've done most of your quarantine period before you even have to begin. If you can't make it for some reason and therefore you need to quarantine after the beginning of term, you'll still be following the courses online, but you'll just be doing it from our residences for that. The hope is that the quarantine restrictions will be relaxed a lot more as the course in the next couple of months come on, and we might be in a different situation come September from where we are now. In the meantime, when students are in school, while the rules have changed, we will still be following the same procedures as we have done before, which is that we need to make sure that students are following health and safety rules, that there's a lot of sanitization happening within the school. We are cleaning on the hour, every hour within the school itself. We won't be adopting the mask policy because that was abolished after May 17th anyway, so that became personal choice of students within schools. They're still allowed to do that sort of thing. We have lateral flow tests that happen within the school as well, so students will be able to take those, and we'll be monitoring these situations. But COVID bubbles have now been relaxed within that. We just need to roll with whatever we're given come September. But for international students, if you are join in our international induction week, which is, or just before that, which is before the start of the term itself, and then you're ready to go on day one.
All right, thank you very much for that, James.
Pleasure.
So the next question is bonding around scholarship and internship placements. So the student wants to confirm if they will be privy to internship and job placements during their studies.
We help with work experience as much as possible, but we have to be ghosts in that respect, in the fact that if students are going for something as proactive as medicine, it needs to come from the student, albeit directed by us. So we are behind you using our links and our partnerships for you to go and do work experience there, those sorts of things. So we will make sure that we've given you internships, some work experience as part of the actual course itself. There will only be so much time if you're doing a 1-year course, but if you're doing a 2-year course, that will be much, much better in order to be able to give you more time for work experience within that. So all students who join on for a medical-based course will be given work experience as part of the program. The more time you have with us, the more we get to do.
Okay, thank you so much. So basically, I think there's a misconception about the A-levels and the foundation. So someone wants to confirm now if MPW is a foundational school or an A-level school.
We're an A-level school, which also offers foundation programs. So we are a college. We are a college, basically 16 to 19 is the usual age range, and the prime market within there is A-levels for all courses at university. We do offer foundation courses, but those are more structured for business-based programs. There is the NCUK, which has a pathway into medicine, but only offers it to a couple of institutions, and those are, generally speaking, accredited British medical schools overseas. So it's not quite the same thing. So as far as medicine goes, A-levels, we are an A-level school. We do have foundation courses, but they are more directed towards other courses. For example, your student before who asked about an engineering program, we have an engineering-based foundation course. So we have both options, but for different courses, it means different things.
Okay, thank you very much. We have quite a lot of questions, but we're running out of time. So sure. I will just try to merge all of them together so that we don't go back and forth on this. So in terms of, you've talked about medicine and engineering now. What other course areas do you have a foundational course pathway for? So
On the foundation or the A-level side of things? I mean, look, as a school, we have experience and expertise in getting people into any course. We have people who join who are Oxbridge students, and we have people who join who are drama students. So it's who the individual is who comes through the door as to what exactly it is that they want, and then we direct individuals from there. After that particular point, on the foundation-based routes, if someone doesn't want to embark on A-levels, and it's a bit more of a straightforward route, if they've finished their high school and they want to go off and do something like business, economics, engineering, as we said before, those sorts of courses within there, then the foundation courses are there in order to do that. We have the University of London foundation course, which focuses on more business and financial-based courses at university, so more economically minded. We have the NCUK, which has 4 different pathways, which includes the business and the engineering. We've mentioned the medicine in there before as well, and humanities-based strands within that. And we have an MPW foundation course as well, which is just specific to business. So those are the real ones for business. I've always found that foundation courses sit neater for things like business courses or engineering at a push within there. Otherwise, I always try and veer people away onto A-levels, and I've done this for 14 years, so my methodology, I suppose, hasn't changed within all of that time. We also, and this addresses a question to someone called Stefan on the chat as well, we have an art foundation program as well, which deals with art, fine art, photography, ceramics, textiles, which is fashion, those sorts of things. So we have an art foundation course as well, which is extremely closely linked to the University of the Arts in London too. So if students want to come and do an art foundation course, then generally speaking, they come across and they do 2 art-based subjects, and they have the opportunity to do something more academic alongside. Otherwise, it's just the art-based course and the portfolio course itself that then takes them on to art school at that moment. If people are specific to these courses, I would just encourage them to have a chat with Damilola over there as well, because she has the on-the-ground knowledge for these subjects and can sort of give a little bit more help.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you very much, James, so far. It's been a really, really exciting and wonderful presentation. Just on a closing note, would you want to give us a final statement about MPW and an overview of everything so far?
Absolutely. Just before the closing note, I think the one thing I would say is if you want me to come and talk about anything different, so there's a lot of questions in there that are not medicine related, and if you want me to talk about different courses, I can always come back and do them on different things and different times. So please just request and I will come back and do, or even have offline individual conversations. That's perfectly easy. I mean, I've been at MPW, as I say, for a very long time for a very specific reason, which is I believe in the place and I believe in the product, and I very much believe in the people and the teaching behind it. It's a place that really nurtures people who have a voice as much as anything, or at least we can develop people to find a voice within there. We have very small teaching. For science-based courses, it's a maximum of 8. For other courses, it's a maximum of 9. And what we're doing is trying to have conversations and discussions whereby we make teaching more interactive and more accessible. And if we do that at source now, it makes people much better candidates for university within there. So I would always say that people who come to MPW are always individuals. We treat you as individuals when you come through the door. We find out what it is you want to do, and then we develop you as people within that time, whilst at the same time you have a constructive and good group dynamic in what is a very supportive community-based setting as well. But always just know who you are in life and know why you want to do something. If you don't know, take your time, take a step back and try and work out who that is before you embark on an application, because applications to any specific course out there live and die by you actually getting across a sense that you want to do this and you have researched why it is that you would like to do this as well. The cleverest people when it comes to the application are also the people who appreciate that you are a commodity to be sold. You've understood what it is someone wants of you, and therefore you've targeted your application towards that particular person. But I can only wish you all very good luck with it all. It's an exciting time to go into whatever it is you want to be doing in the future. And now is the time to do it. As we come out of these years, things start getting a little bit brighter as well. So good luck to you all. And if anyone needs any help, please let me know.
Thank you so much, James. Thank you everyone who have joined us today. It's really been a wonderful time having you all around. And for those that have asked questions, thank you so much for your questions. For those that would need further counseling, we've gotten your emails. We'll reach out to you over the course of the week and the months, and then we'll also redirect you should you need further assistance from the directors and the reps of the university directly. Thank you so much, and I guess this will draw the curtain for now, and we hope to see ourselves some other time. Thank you all.
Thank you all. Have a